Alrighty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited today to share with you my friend and a mentor, really, truly as well, and somebody who I jokingly refer to, whether he likes it or not, as my business bestie, Jeff Prager. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Heather. I appreciate
So I love what Jeff is up to, and I love the evolution of his background. So we're going to talk a little bit about that up front. But Jeff Prager is the cash flow king. He's also an author, speaker, and lifelong entrepreneur. He understands the challenges businesses face, whether they are startups or seasoned pros. His current business is called the CFO Project, which is a team of CFOs who specialize in working with small to medium-sized businesses. They've built a 5-step process to make more money from your business with less stress and frustration. Jeff is a retired CPA and former CEO and CFO. He has been a CPA for over 35 years. Since then, he's helped hundreds of business owners who are stuck or struggling earn more money, reach higher profits, and strengthen their teams. His company has one purpose: to help you make more money. And Jeff walks the walk. He is not just somebody who talks the talk. He has built several multi-million-dollar companies himself. Jeff, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
Wow. Well, great expectations to live up to.
No, I love it. Well, you're so understated. The thing is, I want people to understand like the full breadth of your experience, because you just have so much to share with folks, and everybody who's in business needs your message and needs to be hearing from you, because so many people get the financial side of their business wrong.
Well, you know, everybody talks about their accomplishments, and the most noteworthy one, of course, is I was one of the founders of Ashworth Golf Clothing. If you're a golfer, you've probably heard of that brand. It's international, and we took it from startup through. Actually, we were supposed to go public on Black Monday in 1987. That was a horrendous day for us, but it was after I stopped being a CPA and started running my businesses as a CEO, as the owner, that I had my real education and realized that financial statements didn't get me where I needed to go. And everything I learned as a CPA was irrelevant to me as an entrepreneur. And the bad story is that we got upside down over $1 million in our home building business. And that means that I owed $1 million more than I had.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a great place to be. And it's a dark place, a very dark place. And luckily, because of my experience as a CPA, I had seen hundreds of businesses. So I started inventorying every one of them to find out why some were successful and some weren't. And I found out it came down to 7 numbers. And 5 of them have nothing to do with accounting. And the way we think as a business owner is not the way financial statements are written. And you could ask me to elaborate on any one of those. But we as owners think in terms of cash in and cash out. That's it. But financial statements are about profit, which is really about generally accepted accounting principles and the way the IRS dings you. But it's not the way we think. So think about going to your CPA, they give you your tax return and go, you made, let's say 100 grand this year or 30,000, whatever the number is. And you go, well, then why is it not in my bank account? Where is it? And no one answers that question. And it's because the way you think as an accountant is totally different than the way you think as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, your statement about when you made that switch from CPA to a CEO, that everything you learned as a CPA was irrelevant to actually running a business, like that's just mind-boggling, right? I think it's easy for us as business owners to think like, oh, CPAs have all the secrets. They know how to do the financial side of our business. We don't. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
And the fact of the matter is, they know how to lower your taxes, but they don't know how to, for the most part, the large majority of them do not know how to run a business.
Mm.
And that was my aha moment, if you will, after
Mm-hmm.
practicing for over 20 years
Mm.
is, oh my God, I don't know half what I thought I knew.
Yeah. No, amazing. And I'm going to hit pause really quick, Jeff, because I can edit this. Do you, by chance, I'm just curious, I notice when you move away, the sound goes with you a little bit. Do you, by chance, have even a headset? And it's okay if you don't.
I could put it on.
Let's just try it and see. I just want to see what happens to our sound quality. Sorry, I should have hit pause before we got started and asked, but I really didn't notice it until you moved away from the computer, and then I was like, oh, I should have.
Okay, I'm on my speaker now.
Oh, so much better.
Oh,
It's
okay.
okay. It's okay. So let's pretend that I went back to the introduction where I said welcome, right? And I know that you then started by talking a bit about your introduction, but let's just pretend to go back to that place where I've read your introduction and I just say, welcome, Jeff. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can recreate what I just said.
That's okay. That's
Okay.
okay.
All right.
Let's go back a little bit though in time because you have a wealth of experience and you really have done some phenomenal things in your career. Talk to us a little bit about how you got started down the path of becoming a CPA. What interested you there?
Well, when I got out of college, my wife and I got married while she had 2 years to go, and I had a degree in economics, and I was going to get an MBA in accounting. And my promise to her father was I'd put her through college. So I couldn't get a job, and so I started selling real estate. Now, who's going to buy a house from a kid who's 22 that looks like he's 13, right? So So I found this book, and I really wish I could have afforded to buy it, but I got it at the library, and I don't even know the title, but it was written by a guy in Boston about how to sell commercial real estate, which is over the phone. So people didn't know how young I was. All right. And so I started selling apartment houses and land to builders. And
Ah.
and as I did that, I realized I was selling a lot of tax benefits. And I'm going, wow. And with my background in economics, which was about doing projections, man, I was knocking it out of the park. And so I finally got my wife through college. I went back, and having that 3 years was probably, it was awful, to be honest with you. My wife and I were as poor as church mice. Um, and so when I went back to college with that experience behind me, I overnight became an exceptional student.
Hmm.
And when I applied to go to CPA firms, of the big eight, that's what they were called back then. Um, I got offers from everyone I interviewed with and went with Touche Ross.
Wow.
And that became Deloitte. That's Deloitte today. But man, was that a great experience in terms of learning. I call it my apprenticeship because it was. They worked us like nobody's business.
Mm. Well, there's a couple of parallels I want to point out. I mean, we've been recent friends, but I think there's still plenty that we don't know. I'm laughing at your story about who wants to buy real estate from a kid who's 22 and looks like he's 13. So when I graduated law school, right, and I went straight through, I was 20, what would I have been, 24, 25? I think 24. And um, I just had a couple of the craziest experiences where, like, I went through a Starbucks drive-through one day, and this was near the place where I was working on a large construction litigation project, actually, legal work for a massive piece of construction litigation. And I worked in this building that had been rented and a huge portion of it reserved just for this project. Right? And it was called the War Room and it had 200,000 pages of documentation related to this project. So I had to go there to do the work because that's where the documents lived. I was going through Starbucks one day, and the woman at the drive-through leans out of the window and calls me by the wrong name and says, "What are you doing driving?" And I was so taken back. I looked at her and I was like, I'm sure she could tell by my eyes. I was like, "What do you mean? What am I doing driving?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were my best friend's daughter who's 13."
Oh gosh.
Right? And I'm out of law school and I'm just dying inside, like, oh, my hopes of ever being taken seriously as an attorney have just been like totally flushed down the tube.
So that gets me to a story is because when I finally met the clients, I looked so young. I hired this guy named Shorty Marston, who was 6 foot something and weighed about 400 pounds to go with me on appointments. And I said, "Here, Shorty, you're really good at small talk. You make the small talk. And then I'll do the presentation no matter what they ask. Either say, I agree with Jeff, or Jeff, what do you think?"
You're
And that's how I got
brilliant.
my credibility.
Oh my gosh, you're brilliant. Okay, I can't help myself. There's one other story that I have to share. It was my first deposition, and I'm sitting there, right? I'm the attorney defending my client's deposition, and I'm sitting there, and we're waiting. Like, we're all there. My client's to the right of me. You know, the court reporter's here at the end of the table. Across the table is opposing counsel and her client. And we're just waiting and we're trying to figure out, like, why are we not yet starting? And so the opposing counsel leans across and says, "Well, to my client, when's your attorney showing up?" And I sat there and I was like, "Excuse me? I'm his attorney." And we'd already introduced ourselves and everything, but it totally was lost on her that I was the attorney. And she's like, "Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I thought you were just his girlfriend."
Oh, wow.
Right? And so, yes, the number of times I had that kind of experience at the start of my legal career, I just thought, oh, there's no hope. But you were steps ahead of me, man. Hiring Shorty Marston, I needed a plan like that. Anyways, well, I love that your background is in economics, that you got some real life experience before choosing to go back to school to become a CPA. So talk to me about your career as a CPA and especially that transition where you became a CEO and business owner yourself and realized there were some things missing from the CPA perspective.
So I took a company that you may have heard of called Ashworth Golf Clothing public, and we started from scratch. And it was one of my biggest successes, but they came to my CPA practice we specialized in growing companies, not in taxes and stuff like that. We did a lot of projections on major projects. And so we helped them get started. And there's a long story. They weren't a clothing company when they came to me. And I showed them their projections didn't work. And then they said, "Well, let's go do clothing." And I said, "I don't know anything about clothing." And they said, "Well, yeah, but you're really good at doing these projections." And that became the foundation of getting into business and becoming Ashworth Golf Clothing, which was an international brand. So when I finally sold my stock in that and my CPA practice, I was 42. I was sitting on top of the world. And then when a couple of we specialized in real estate because long-term projects, building apartments, land development, and subdivisions for home builders. And a couple of my clients came back to me after the recession in 1986. It was about 1994 and said, "Hey, we want you to help us get started in another business." And the one I want to talk about is the land development business. I was an owner, but a minor owner. My partners were a lawyer and a land developer, and they really knew their stuff. But the home builder, Steve Strauss, he and I formed a company called Strauss Homes. And within 2 years, we were upside down $1 million. That means I owed $1 million more than I had. And it put me in a pretty dark spot. And what I realized is that everything I learned as a CPA was irrelevant. It didn't help me at all. And I mean, we really had our backs to the wall. And I said, look, I've been exposed to hundreds of businesses. Let me figure out what they did right and what they did wrong. The first thing I realized is the owners of a business do not think like accountants, and their financial statements are kind of irrelevant because we as business owners think about it as cash in and cash out. And as you go forward, how much cash will come in and how much will go out. Whereas financial people are stuck in the past with how much did you make, how much taxes do you owe, and how much taxes can we save? A different mindset, incredibly. And then as I went through, I said, oh my gosh, there's a commonality. The people that are successful are looking at their numbers going forward. But it's not just accounting. Those were only two of what I call the 7 magic or key numbers. The others deal with customer acquisition, customer conversion, number of transactions per customer, average price per customer, and customer retention. And when you start developing your strategies around those 7 numbers, the world opens up to you. So I won't go through all the things about how bad it got, but we redesigned our product line, our product mix, our messaging, and we became production builders instead of custom builders. And within a few years, we became the 2nd largest privately owned home builder in Colorado.
Wow.
And it was pretty traumatic. It was pretty traumatic. But the key is to plan and use common sense. Everybody thinks we know so much magic. And truly, if you can't put it on the back of a napkin, you're probably overcomplicating it. But it takes a lot of work to put it on the back of the napkin.
Right, right, and it reminds me of a phrase that simplicity takes effort. It doesn't happen on its own, right?
Right. It's like Ben Franklin said, I would have written you a short letter, but I didn't have enough time.
Right.
Right?
That's exactly it. That's
And that's
exactly
what
it.
people do. They write business plans in their mind dumps, strategic plans. It's like 1 page is enough.
Yes. Well, and I love that you've got 7 magic numbers. And what it sounds like to me is that those magic numbers are really a way of looking at business fundamentals with finances in mind, right?
Exactly. And that's what we do at the CFO project is we go through your numbers and we isolate which numbers are working and which aren't, and we help you generate the next steps. And it's really key. People are afraid of their numbers. It's intuitively not intuitive.
Well, and why do you think that is? Like, when you come across your clients and you're working with people in business, is it most of the people? Is it all of them? Like, talk to us about that reality of people being afraid of their numbers.
I would say even in the bigger companies I've dealt with, the CEO is afraid of the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is think about numbers. They're punitive.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got an 89 on an exam, that was a B plus. A 90 was an A minus. Essentially, they're both the same. So people, you get on a scale. You cringe before you get on that scale, right? Yeah, I could see you doing it too. So people are intuitively, we've been conditioned to be afraid of numbers.
Mm.
And yet, the very successful people have made numbers their friends because you take them not as, oh my God, I'm 5 pounds overweight, but oh my gosh, if I do this, I could get rid of those 5 pounds and think about how much lower my cholesterol will be and how much better I'll feel. And when I jog, I'm carrying 5 pounds less. So we're conditioned in the negative. We're conditioned for failure and not for success.
That's fascinating. I'd never actually thought of that before. about our relationship to numbers. The fact that generally we're conditioned from a young age to associate negativity with them in some way, or that they're a kind of a punitive function in life. But I think it's true. I mean, even you and I, before we went live on this, right, we were talking about sales. I was talking about a recent event where I spoke from stage and comparing those numbers to the last event, which was live pre-COVID. And there is, I think we have a way of interpreting numbers that can really, send either positive or negative signals to us. And yet I love what you say about successful people really looking at them and just using them as feedback.
Yeah.
Not seeing them as like necessarily failure, just additional information to look at in the overall picture.
It makes you react quicker. Because what a lot of people do is they just get really negative, and it affects their relationships with their spouses, their family, their friends. They deteriorate, your mood changes, and your feeling of self-worth diminishes. And when all that negativity starts working on your system, then it starts affecting your health, and it becomes like a domino effect. And that dark place, I've been there. God knows I've been there. When I was running Strauss Homes, it's not fun. And I think we all go there when you own a business. And the other part is our emotions get out of whack. We're either overly happy or overly negative or depressed, and we're not finding that mid ground that allows us to enjoy what we have.
Well, and from, I come from the legal industry, and what you're talking about as far as financials, essentially being able to, spin us into a dark place or just put a whole layer of stress over essentially every area of life. I mean, I know that even you look at marriage and divorce and statistics on divorce, it's something crazy high when you talk about financial stress. Something like financial stress being responsible for like 90% of divorces.
Huge.
It's huge. It's one of the biggest factors in relationships breaking down and not being able to work.
Yeah, and here's the other part. If you don't know how to use this stuff, you ignore it. And that's what I figured out in this business is, hey, if I could just show it to you, you don't even have to understand where I got the numbers, how I got the numbers. Just use them going forward. That's all you need to know. I don't want you to be an accountant. I don't want you to be a financial wizard. You're a wizard at what you do. You and I talk about it a lot. It's like, it would be like me practicing law. I don't know what you guys do. I just know the results, that I'm protected, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and what a relief for people to hear that, though. I mean, for anybody listening, like, I love Jeff's clarity around this. Like, you don't have to understand what I'm looking at. You don't have to understand how I got there, right? That's your job. And you really just help people shift their perspectives and where they focus, right? And for me, like, a little bit of this conversation reminds me, I went in after having my son, and this is personal, but I'm a pretty open book, and I was having difficulty breastfeeding, and the nurses at Swedish Hospital, which is where I had my son, told me, you need to go to this acupuncturist. They gave me her name. I'd never had acupuncture before, right? And I show up, and I remember asking her this question: do I have to believe in this for it to work? You know? And it's a little bit the same thing. Like, your clients are probably worried, like, do I have to believe in this or understand it or, somehow like know about it for it to work? And it seems like your answer is no.
Well, I'd like to use your story, but it would be just too personal to tell my clients.
No, it's fine. Because here's the profound, let me talk about that experience, because I really thought, like, is some part of this mental? Is some part of it like what I have to do differently? And And my son was a month old at that point, within a half hour of leaving her office, my milk came in for the very first time, and I physically experienced what that was like from one session of acupuncture. So the answer was no, and it was clearly no. Like, I didn't have to know what's up. She did her magic. And I think it's so reassuring to clients when we can say, like, look, we'll give you the golden nuggets. We'll help you shape your framework or your focus points or etc. But you don't have to dig into the system or be the genius behind the system or be a CPA to know how to run your business the right way.
In fact, I would say that almost all of my clients have no clue what accounting's about.
Right.
And that's what a CFO does. People don't know what a CFO is because only big companies usually have CFOs. And my partner Adam and I have figured out how to make this affordable for small to medium businesses.
Which is amazing. So tell me a bit about how that works. What's your system? How does that work?
Well, the first thing you do is you call us, and we have what we call a right fit call to make sure that we can help you and you're open to what we're going to do. The second one, and we haven't charged you a nickel yet, is we want to look at the big picture and see where you are and say, hey, do you realize this is your spot? Once we're there, what we do is we do an assessment. Once you hire us, we do an assessment and we get your numbers put together and figure out where you are in terms of the fine print. And then what we do is we target goals for you. So this is the key. It's like going to Weight Watchers. They say you weigh 5 pounds too much. You know you got to lose 5 pounds. We target those goals with you. And the goals ultimately lead to not only more profit, because that's important, but you could stay in business without profit. You can't stay in business without cash. So we take that extra step and say, how's this going to look in terms of your cash flow? So we set those goals up. And then once a month, what we do is in that second stage, we've created a scoreboard for you. So we update your scoreboard month by month, and it literally flashes on those 7 key numbers and your cash, 8 numbers, red, green, and yellow. Green, you're doing great. Red, we got work to do. Yellow, we gotta change this. And then from there, we come up with an action plan. What has to be done in the next 30 days that you pretty much, the client, will be able to tell us better than us sometimes. But once you see the problem, the answers become clear. And then in terms of that, we look in 3 time frames. What do you have to do the next 30 days? What do you have to do this year so that we're in a better position than when we started? And then long term, how do we get your business so you could either sell it or turn it into a cash cow? So we're in 3 time frames in every meeting. And it's all about getting you to your ultimate goal, whatever that may be, so that you have the time to do what you want with the people you want to do it with.
Well,
Isn't
I love
that what it's all about?
That's right. That's right. What do you say to people that are feeling some resistance around opening up their books to outside eyeballs? Like, how do your clients know they're ready for your help? Because I think there is a little bit of resistance, especially around people who've been in business for some time, and some judgment and shame around, like, I should know this already. I should have already figured this out. How do you help people over that hump?
Well, first of all, you shouldn't know it, because we get in business because of our specialties. Mm-hmm. And very few people are in a manufacturing company because they're an excellent accountant. You know what I'm saying? So that's number one. Number two is, no matter what you think and how bad you think it might be, there's been worse. Right? And it reminds me of a story. When we were in the 86 recession, one of my clients was a contractor, and he moved to California because he thought it was better in California. And he came back 5 years later, and I mean, he was my client through all this thing. And he goes, Jeff, I learned something. And I said, what? And this has stuck with me since the late 80s. He goes, Jeff, it's never as bad as you think, nor is it ever as good as you think.
Well, I was going to say there's probably the folks who, you would say them, don't worry, I've seen worse. But even for the people at the top of the chain who think they have things handled, I'm certain that there are ways that you would improve their scenario and make it even better.
And that's the truth. And that's the truth, is that we all are in the journey is the fun part. Mm-hmm. But for most of us, it becomes the nightmare. But no matter what we do, we can improve, whatever.
That's right.
What we want to do is avoid the mistakes, because running a business is not easy. People go, oh, you tell somebody you have your own law firm, and they immediately think you're rolling in money and life is just great, right? And you're going, shit, I don't know how I'm going to pay for tomorrow's groceries.
Right. Especially when you're in business for yourself.
Right. Nobody really understands that. So it's a lonely place.
Yeah.
As well. And that's what we're trying to get at, is don't make it any lonelier than it has to be. And there are things we could do to make it better. And will it ever be perfect? No. But we want to avoid the mistakes other people have made. And that's why we hire consultants to help us avoid those mistakes. Unfortunately, a lot of consultants out there have been, middle management in great big large companies, and they want to manage your money, and they don't have $1,000 to their name. And you go, you're not for real.
That's right.
But a lot of us don't know that, nor have they faced the problems we as entrepreneurs have faced.
Yes.
And they're not there. They're just not there. And it just, that's one of my things, is like, there's so many people that call themselves consultants, but couldn't consult themselves out of a wet paper bag.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be one of the quotes. Couldn't consult themselves out of a wet paper bag. Oh my gosh, Jeff, I love you. So there's a couple things that I want to dig into, because this part of the conversation is really important. I feel like all of us on the entrepreneurial journey, we have opportunities to help ourselves move forward faster if we work with the right people. And we also have the opportunities to really set ourselves back a ways if we choose to work with the wrong people. I know what advice I give my clients about how you select an attorney, how you know whether somebody or not is a fit for you, how do you even approach the marketplace and begin those conversations, and what that process looks like. What do you have to say to people about how to choose somebody, whether it's you or somebody else, who is the right fit? Because there's lots of people out there, like you say, that are giving the wrong advice when it comes to financial issues in business.
Well, the first thing is ask if they've been in your shoes. Now, you don't ask it like that, but hey, what have you accomplished? What are your biggest victories? What is the most negative point you've been at? What is the most positive? Where are you now? Why are you doing it? Is it to earn a living, or this is my give back? I think Heather, I retired 13 years ago. And
yeah, you could be leaving all of us in the dust, Jeff, and you're still here fighting the good fight, just trying to help people.
And that's what I get off on, is if I could turn a business around, if I could get you to open your eyes. It's like I was working with somebody doing a projection for a furniture store they were going to open. And we're talking, and I go, tell me about your marketing. And then I said, tell me your marketing budget. I started with your marketing budget. They go, it'll be about $5,000 a month. I go, okay. Now, and I waited a while, so they couldn't connect it. And I go, tell me about what you're going to do in terms of marketing. And as they were listing it off, I go, and what do you think that will cost? And the number was $10,000 a month. And you could see the eyes pop open and go, oh my gosh, I now see the correlation between the numbers and what I'm talking about. And that's what I live for, that little, oh my gosh, I get it.
Connecting those dots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it takes years to connect the dots. I know people ask me to teach them how to do it, and I do, but they still there's so much nuance to what we do as professionals, and connecting the dots is the hard part. I
Yeah.
mean, for us with experience, it's easy,
Yeah.
but it took us years to make it easy.
Right. Right. Well, and I see in my profession plenty of attorneys working really hard to serve their clients at a very high level, but not teaching them or doing anything to transform the journey of the client, right?
Right.
Just delivering a done for you service that is what they think they're there to do, but not having either the time or the bandwidth or the personality for actually saying, here's how you actually adjust course. Here's how you do it differently. Here's how you become a better, more strategic leader of your business.
Right. And that's the key is we do transform you, but we don't teach you the nuance. You don't have to know what we know.
Right, right. You
We're in,
deliver, what I like to call it is you deliver the golden nuggets, right? The
right.
highlights of how you can shift something in a big way, but you don't have to give them the PhD in it.
Yeah, you don't have to know how I figured out what the nugget was and what my alchemy was to make your nugget. You don't
Right.
need to know that stuff. All you want is the gold nugget.
That's right. That's right. So, what do you see? Like, talk to me about the advice that you see in your space and especially where it goes wrong. What are people, even from the client side, doing wrong when it comes to trying to get a grasp around their financials?
Well, it's not some, first of all, a lot of them don't even look. They just
Yeah.
wait to talk to their CPA, or they look at the bottom line, which is the most misleading theory in the universe. The profit is not the bottom line. The cash flow is the bottom line. Okay. So the bottom line isn't helping you. And so they focus on that and they could be making a profit. But have you ever gone to the bank and tried to, or to the grocery store and tried to buy a bushel of groceries with your accounts receivable? You
Right.
can't do it. We're not on a barter system for the most part.
Right.
So number one is um, a be careful that you're focused on the right things. The
Yeah.
second thing is be careful of people who sell you a silo. In
Mm,
other words, here I am, I'm an SEO expert. Everything's going to be answered by SEO. In reality, what transform a business is not one big thing. It's a lot of little things.
I love
So,
that.
so if we could get your gross profit up by 0.5%, here's a good one. I had a doctor. They saw their patients on average 4 times a year. By making it 4.1 times a year, their bottom line increased by $250,000.
Mm,
Now, if you focus on customer retention only or number of transactions only, you wouldn't have figured that out. So what you have to do is go, okay, what do I have to do with my customer journey? What do I have to do with my product offering? How do I transform my nurses and other doctors to sell this other service? So it had implications throughout the whole business. And
mhm.
people talk about the funnel. And the funnel usually means getting people in your marketing funnel, getting their name. Well, what about the business funnel? How do you get them from that name to cash in the bank? And that's the focus. And rarely is it one thing.
Mhm.
You know, having a legal agreement is one piece of the puzzle. Understanding your financials is one piece of the puzzle. But how does it interact with all the others? You have an engine. You and I are like a carburetor and or a gas pump or whatever, right? But what we have to look at is how do you get that whole engine so it's really a racing engine?
Right. It is not one thing.
It's not one thing. And
Yeah.
I don't know how to pull apart an engine anymore. Okay. And with the new electronics, I mean, I grew up when we gapped our spark plugs. I haven't lifted the hood of my car in probably 15 years. But I know when the engine is, if my car is bucking, I know something's wrong. If my brakes are squeaking, I know something is wrong. And I bring it to the mechanic who looks at everything and fixes only what needs to be fixed.
That's right. Well, and the thing that I love about your experience that I do think sets you apart is you've got both this experience as a CPA, but also being on the inside of not only your own, but so many other people's businesses over the years, right? It just gives you phenomenal perspective.
So you brought up something, Heather. At my peak, back in about 2004, I was an owner, partner, or CEO of over 156 companies at the same time. And that comes down to running it. Oh, this is something, Heather. My whole management philosophy is you could run a company by pointing your thumbs up or thumbs down. And if you have it running correctly, those reports come to you every single Monday, and all you do is you pour through them in 10 minutes per company. Point your thumbs, and you have two piles, the ones that are working great and the ones where you have problems. And you look at the problems, you isolate the problems based on those 7 numbers, and you give it to your executives to fix.
That story alone, Jeff, for anybody listening, in case you doubt Jeff's system or you wonder whether or not what he's saying is accurate, I mean, imagine sitting and looking at reports from 156 companies and being able to analyze them in 10 minutes. I mean, you've got a superpower, Jeff, that people need to know about. I love that.
And that's what we're bringing to small to medium-sized businesses. It's here's your 10 minutes.
I love it. So how do people... Oh,
yeah.
Go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off. Well, I mean, I think you've offered a very generous gift to people who are listening. If they are in the field, they're the medium size, describe what size of business they are again, and I can edit this. Small to medium
sized businesses.
Yep. You've offered a right fit call, right? And a download of what you are doing, giving people some feedback and an overview of how to run their business. I think it's one of the most generous offers. I mean, if anybody's listening and you are in the world of needing support with your financials, I mean, I'd be racing to the phone. How do people get in touch with you? How do they connect with you to find out if that's a fit for them?
I'm going to give you 2 ways.
Yep.
The first way is go to our website, thecfoproject.com, thecfoproject.com. And there you could sign up for a right fit call, and we have a video going through our 5-step process. Okay. Awesome. It's a pretty neat, I think it's about 40 minutes long. And make sure we're the right fit, because if you go into it with a bad attitude, or we go into it with a bad attitude, there's no fit.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The second is just contact me, Jeff, directly, jeff@thecfoproject.com.
Awesome. And
That's
I'll put that information on the our page with show notes, so people can also find those at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. But Jeff, a couple of final questions for you. One, just based on the name of my show, I can't help but ask this question, right? Guts, grit, and great business. Give us an example, and mostly I'm interested in your thoughts and experience around mindset, of having worked yourself through some really tough times, and what are the distinguishing characteristics or, stories around mindset that really made a difference for you?
I'm going to go back a little further. Remember I told you I was selling real estate, commercial real estate? I grew up very poor, and so did my wife. Okay. And I was selling real estate, and I'm selling commercial real estate. Well, who owns these buildings? Wealthy people, right? You realize they're no smarter than you. They don't know any more than you. And you realize it is all about mindset. It's sort of like the little train that could. You've read that to your kids, right?
A
Yeah,
million times. Yep.
it's the same thing. It's like, look, people without half our talent have done it. So the key is to surround yourself with people that have been there, done that, and can help you get through it.
Mm.
And that alone, having people encourage you to go forward, because trust me, when you're in the dark spot, you can't talk about it with your spouse. You can't talk about it with your employees. You can't talk about it with anybody. And so you start cornering yourself and it gets worse. No, the exact opposite. Your mindset should be, somebody's been through this. Who is it that's been through it that can show me how to get out of it or give me ideas? And that's why people who are older, like me, we have a lot of experiences to offer those who are going through it.
I love that.
And that's where we come in. Yeah, technologically, I'm not as good as a lot of the younger people. I'll admit that. But in terms of wisdom, they don't have the wisdom that people that have been through it, done that, been there, have.
That's right.
So if you find yourself in a negative mindset, ask yourself, who should you be talking to? And find that mentor. And that mentor is not your spouse. It's not your employees. It's probably not your friends.
And it's probably not your Uncle Bob or your, friend Joe who is, in a parallel business but same stage, right?
Right. And like your spouse is going to say, I trust you, I believe in you, you're going to do well. Right. Meanwhile, you're still left with the problem and no ideas how to solve it.
Yeah.
So you don't need encouragement, you need help.
Well, exactly. And you need help from somebody who is experienced. The thing I love about that, I was on a phone call actually earlier today with a client who is facing a tough time with her boyfriend, and they're looking at bankruptcy as a potential option because they're tenants and they've got a lease, and people everywhere with COVID are suffering who are in similar circumstances. But the question they had is whether or not they should approach this scenario, and it's going to require some negotiation, clearly, with the landlord, whether or not they should try on their own or get counsel ahead of time. And I wouldn't be the counsel for them because I don't do landlord-tenant stuff, even though I've got some experience with it. But it's a little bit like the question of, just because you have a pair of scissors doesn't mean you should be the one to do the cutting, right? If you're giving yourself a haircut, right? Even though they might have to pay for 3 or 4 hours of the attorney's time to draft a letter, what they're really benefiting from, way beyond just that single item, is the fact that that attorney has walked through that scenario probably hundreds, if not thousands of times with other clients. And the nuance and the strategic difference that that's going to make to the overall picture goes far beyond just a single touch point and a single letter.
Right. It's like touching a hot stove. You don't want to touch it if you could avoid it.
Yeah.
And people don't realize it. Sometimes you exasperate your situation because you're trying to solve it yourself. And again, you don't know the nuances. It's what I've learned about finance. People don't hire me to teach them accounting.
Yeah.
Just tell me what it's telling me.
That's right.
What's the story? And one last story, if I can.
Yep.
So, I remember my oldest son, when he was a child, I go, boy, I'd love it if you became a CPA. And he goes, Dad, I could never do what you're doing. It's so boring. And I started thinking about it. And if I had to do accounting the way most people think of accountants, I would have shot myself years ago. I don't do bookkeeping and I don't do tax returns. Even when I had my CPA practice, do you know how many tax returns I did? 0. Mm-hmm. Mine was the strategy going in and coming out of it.
Yes.
I had my partners do the tax returns. And just like you, your strategy going into and out of reviewing your financials is what's important. How they come together, all you want to know is that they're telling a true story, and have somebody tell you what that story is.
That's right. That's right. Well, and the benefit of getting somebody like you, getting your eyeballs on their business is way more than even just the time spent there. It's, you bring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of similar experiences and the wisdom that comes from walking people through strategically a very similar scenario to the table in that one instant. So
Right.
it's right, but yeah, the value is just, it's so it's so important for people to have advisors like you in their business. So, Jeff, I'm so grateful that you are here with us today. I love this conversation. I mean, even the part about talking about why we're essentially negatively trained in our relationship with numbers and why it's important to understand that, but not be stuck there as business owners.
It's so true. And uh, yeah, we you're why get stuck on something that's so inconsequential and yet has so many consequences if you don't pay attention to it?
That's right, which a lot of people do. Well, I so appreciate you. I'm so glad to be connected. Thank you for joining us today. Any last words for folks before we sign off?
No, if, Heather is phenomenal at what she does. And I'm not saying it idly. I work with a lot of attorneys in the course of what I do. And if you haven't had a chat with Heather at this point, you owe it to yourself to do it. And the second thing is, please, please don't be afraid of your numbers.
Mm,
Take it positive as opposed to negative.
that's right. Nope, I love that. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you, Jeff. I'm such a fan, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, Heather.
Bye-bye.